When we think of discipline, most of us imagine rigid routines, strict rules, and sacrifices. But in reality, discipline is not about punishing yourself. It's about training your brain to focus on what matters most and creating the mindset that allows you to follow through, even when you don't feel like it. Our brains are not naturally wired for discipline. They are wired for survival. That means avoiding discomfort, seeking immediate rewards, and conserving energy. So when you say you want to wake up earlier, finish that project, or stop procrastinating, your brain resists. It tells you, do it tomorrow, because tomorrow feels safer. The challenge isn't that you lack discipline, it's that your brain is untrained. Training your brain for discipline is like building a muscle. At first, it feels heavy, uncomfortable, and slow. But with practice, repetition, and patience, your brain learns to adapt. The small wins you create today become the foundation for stronger habits tomorrow. Think about it this way. Discipline is not the absence of freedom. It's the foundation of freedom. Without discipline, you are controlled by impulses, distractions, and emotions. With discipline, you gain the power to direct your life, to decide what gets your energy, and to create the future you want. The key is to start small. Don't overwhelm your brain with impossible expectations. Instead, give it little victories. Wake up 15 minutes earlier, say no to one distraction, finish one task you've been delaying. Each time you do, your brain begins to trust you. It starts to believe that you mean what you say, and that trust builds momentum. Discipline is not about perfection, it's about consistency. You will stumble, you will break promises to yourself, and you will feel resistance. But each time you choose to get back on track, you strengthen the mental pathways that lead to discipline. That's how you train your brain, not by never failing, but by always returning. So when you think of discipline, don't see it as a burden, see it as a skill, one that can be learned, practiced, and mastered. And remember, the real strength of discipline is not in controlling your life. It's in creating a life that doesn't control you. Fifth keynotes of the speech, discipline is not natural. It's trained. Our brains are wired for comfort and instant gratification, so discipline must be developed through practice. Small victories matter most. Begin with small, achievable actions to build trust with your brain and gain momentum. Discipline creates freedom. It's not about restriction, but about gaining control over your choices and future. Consistency over perfection. Discipline grows through persistence, not by avoiding mistakes. Discipline is a skill, not a trait. Anyone can learn, practice, and strengthen it with patience and effort. Most people grow up believing that discipline is something you either have or don't have, as if it is a personality trait assigned at birth. We admire those who seem to wake up early, follow routines, and push through challenges as if they were born with extraordinary willpower. But the truth is, discipline is not natural. It doesn't come hardwired into our brains. Our brains, in their most primitive design, are not built for discipline at all. They are built for survival, and survival has very different rules. Survival tells us to avoid discomfort, to stay where it's safe, to conserve energy, and to chase immediate rewards. That is why you find yourself reaching for your phone when you should be working, hitting the snooze button when you promised to wake early, or postponing the difficult task until tomorrow. Your brain is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect you from discomfort. So if discipline is not natural, where does it come from? It comes from training. Think of discipline as a mental muscle. Just as no one is born with strong arms or legs, no one is born with perfect discipline. Strength is built through exercise, through repetition, through resistance. The more you engage those muscles, the stronger they become. In the same way, the more you practice small acts of discipline, the more capable your brain becomes of handling bigger challenges. The difference between someone who appears disciplined and someone who struggles is not character. It is simply practice. Consider the child learning to play the piano. On the first day, they cannot imagine performing a song. Their hands stumble over the keys, their patience runs thin, and the process feels impossible. But with practice, their fingers learn to move more easily. Their brain adapts, creating new connections, building memory, and strengthening coordination. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel natural. The same is true for discipline. Waking up earlier, sticking to a workout, focusing on a task, or resisting distractions may feel unnatural at first. That is only because your brain hasn't practiced enough. The discomfort is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of growth. Training your brain for discipline begins with small steps. If you attempt to overhaul your entire life overnight, your brain will fight back, overwhelmed by too much discomfort. But if you begin with something manageable, like setting aside 10 minutes to read instead of scrolling through social media, your brain learns to adjust. That one small victory tells your brain, I can do this. And with every repetition, your confidence builds, your trust in yourself strengthens, and your capacity for discipline expands. Discipline is not built in one dramatic act of willpower, but in hundreds of small choices repeated consistently over time. What makes discipline powerful is not that it eliminates your natural impulses, but that it teaches you how to work with them. Your brain will always crave comfort and instant gratification. Training for discipline does not erase those cravings, it teaches you how to rise above them. Imagine standing at a crossroad. One path is the easy comfort, the other is the harder choice that leads to growth. Discipline is the ability to choose the harder path often enough that it begins to feel familiar. Over time, the brain starts to recognize the rewards of discipline, not just the discomfort. It learns that finishing the work, Keeping the promise or achieving the goal feels better than the fleeting satisfaction of distraction. It's important to remember that discipline is not about punishing yourself. Too many people associate it with strictness, deprivation, or rigidity. But training your brain for discipline is not about making life harder, it's about making life better. Without discipline, you are constantly pulled by impulses, reacting to whatever feels easiest in the moment. With discipline, you create direction. You teach your brain that you are in control of your choices, not your distractions. That control brings freedom because now you can choose the path that truly serves you, not the one that only feels good temporarily. This is why the first step to building discipline is changing how you see it. Instead of believing that some people are born disciplined and others are not, accept that discipline is trained, just like any skill. That belief alone changes everything. It means discipline is within your reach. It means you can build it no matter where you start. Every time you resist a distraction, every time you show up when you don't feel like it, every time you keep a promise to yourself, you are training your brain, you are strengthening the muscle of discipline. And the more you train, the more natural it becomes. When people think about discipline, they often imagine it as something grand and overwhelming. They picture a life where they wake up at 5 in the morning every day, follow a flawless routine, exercise with military precision, and never miss a single commitment. The image of discipline feels heavy, almost intimidating, as if it demands perfection from day one. And because of that belief, many people never even begin. They set goals so big, so drastic, that failure feels inevitable. But the truth is, discipline is not built on massive leaps. It is built on small victories. It is the little wins repeated day after day that shape your brain, your habits, and your character. The brain is more willing to accept small adjustments than drastic ones. Imagine someone who has never exercised a day in their life. If they suddenly decide to run 10 kilometers every morning, their brain and body will resist. The effort will feel unbearable, the pain will be discouraging, and quitting will feel like the only option. But if that same person starts with 10 minutes of walking each day, the brain registers it as achievable. It feels like a win, a victory they can claim. And once the brain begins to associate that action with success, it becomes more open to the idea of doing more. Over time, 10 minutes turns into 30, a walk turns into a jog, and a jog becomes a run. The transformation happens not because of one giant decision, but because of many small ones. Small victories matter because they rewire the brain's relationship with discipline. Instead of viewing discipline as painful sacrifice, the brain begins to see it as progress, as evidence of growth. Each small win creates a feeling of accomplishment, and that feeling reinforces the behavior. Think about how it feels to check off a task on a to-do list. Even if it's something as simple as sending an email or making your bed, the act of completion gives your brain a sense of reward. That sense of reward is powerful. It builds momentum. You start to think, if I can do this, I can do more. That's the secret. Momentum is not built on massive victories, but on small, steady ones. Consider someone trying to wake up earlier. If they usually wake up at 9 a.m., suddenly forcing themselves to wake at 5 a.m. is a shock to their system. They may succeed once or twice, but soon the exhaustion takes over and the habit collapses. But if they start by waking up at 84.5 instead of 900, their brain barely resists. It feels manageable, and they can succeed consistently. After a week, they shift to 80-30, then 80-15, then 80-100. Step by step, they build the habit. Each small victory reinforces their discipline, and eventually, waking up earlier no longer feels like an impossible task. Small victories also create trust within yourself. Every time you make a promise to yourself and keep it, no matter how small, you strengthen your belief in your own reliability. Most people struggle with discipline because they don't trust themselves anymore. They've said, I'll start tomorrow so many times that their brain doesn't believe it. But when you commit to small actions and follow through, your brain starts to recognize, yes, I can depend on myself. That trust is invaluable. It's what allows you to tackle bigger challenges later because your brain knows you can be counted on. There's also a psychological advantage to focusing on small wins. When the task ahead feels overwhelming, the natural response is procrastination. But when the task feels small and achievable, your brain is more likely to engage. Reading one page of a book feels easy, so you start. And once you start, you often read more than one page. Doing 5 push-ups feels easy, so you start. And once you're on the floor, you might do 10. This is the hidden power of small victories. They lower the barrier to entry, and once you've begun, momentum carries you forward. We underestimate how deeply small actions shape us over time. A person who chooses to drink water instead of soda one day doesn't notice much change, but a year of repeating that choice transforms their health. A person who spends 10 minutes journaling instead of scrolling social media doesn't feel the impact immediately. But months later, they notice their mind is clearer, their focus stronger, their decisions sharper. These small victories compound, just like money in a savings account. One deposit may seem insignificant, but consistent deposits create wealth. Small victories consistently earned create the wealth of discipline. So often, people quit before they even begin because they look too far ahead. They see the mountain and doubt their ability to climb it. But if they focused only on the next step, they would realize that climbing is possible. The small steps, the small wins are what make the climb achievable. Discipline is not about winning one huge battle. It is about winning hundreds of small ones quietly every day until they become second nature. At first, The idea that discipline creates freedom sounds contradictory. Freedom is often imagined as doing whatever you want, whenever you want, without rules or restrictions. Discipline, on the other hand, is seen as the opposite: rules, structure, limits, and sacrifices. But in reality, true freedom doesn't come from doing everything you feel like in the moment. That kind of freedom is short-lived and often destructive. True freedom comes when you have control over your choices, when you are not enslaved by impulses, distractions, or emotions. And that control is only possible through discipline. Think about time. Most people feel like they don't have enough of it. They say they're too busy, too overwhelmed, constantly running from one thing to another. But what steals their time is not the amount of work they have. It's the lack of discipline in how they use it. Without discipline, hours are lost to scrolling, to procrastination, to reacting to every distraction. At the end of the day, they feel exhausted yet unfulfilled, with little to show for the time that has passed. But a person with discipline chooses how to use their hours. They create routines, prioritize what matters, and say no to what doesn't. That doesn't limit their freedom, it gives them more of it. Because when you are disciplined with your time, you suddenly have space for rest, for creativity, for relationships, and for growth. Discipline frees you from the feeling of always being controlled by the clock. Now think about health. A person without discipline eats whatever feels good in the moment, skips exercise, and stays up too late. In the short term, that feels like freedom, doing what you want without restraint. But over time, it leads to fatigue, sickness, and limitations on what you can do with your body. The choices that felt like freedom actually create chains. On the other hand, someone disciplined with their health, who chooses nourishing foods, consistent movement, and enough rest, may feel restricted in the moment, but what they gain is long-lasting freedom. They have energy, strength, and vitality. They can run, travel, explore, and live without the limitations poor health brings. That is true freedom, the kind only discipline makes possible. The same principle applies to money. Without discipline, you spend as soon as you earn, chasing the thrill of buying what you want immediately. It feels like freedom in the moment, but it leads to debt, stress, and being tied to obligations you cannot escape. Discipline with money, saving, budgeting, planning may feel restrictive at first, but it creates financial security, the freedom to make choices without fear, the freedom to take opportunities without being trapped by debt. What feels like restriction in the short term creates liberation in the long term. Discipline also creates freedom in the mind. Without discipline, your thoughts are scattered, pulled in every direction by worries, distractions, and impulses. You sit down to work, but your attention drifts. You want to focus on a conversation, but your phone keeps pulling you away. The lack of discipline robs you of mental freedom because you are constantly reacting instead of choosing where to place your focus. But when you train your brain to discipline its attention, to say no to distractions, to stay present in the moment, you gain mental freedom. You are no longer a slave to every notification, every urge, every thought that pops into your mind. Instead, you choose what deserves your attention. That power is the essence of freedom. Freedom without discipline is like having a powerful car with no steering wheel. You can go fast, but you can't control where you're going. It feels thrilling for a while, but eventually you crash. Discipline is the steering wheel. It doesn't take away the power of the car. It directs it. It gives you the ability to choose the path, to decide where your energy and effort will take you. Without it, your life is at the mercy of impulses. With it, your life is guided by intention. The paradox of discipline is that the more you practice it, the freer you become. When you are disciplined with your habits, you are free from regret. When you are disciplined with your emotions, you are free from being controlled by anger or fear. When you are disciplined with your commitments, you are free from the guilt of broken promises. Discipline gives you freedom not just in action, but in peace of mind, because you know you are living with control and purpose. So while discipline may feel like saying no, in truth it is saying yes to a greater life, to deeper fulfillment, and to real freedom. When most people think about discipline, they imagine perfection. They imagine someone who never skips a workout, never eats junk food, never procrastinates, never makes mistakes, and always keeps to the plan. That picture of discipline is what keeps so many from even trying, because perfection is impossible. The truth is, discipline has very little to do with being perfect. It has everything to do with being consistent. Discipline is not about never stumbling. It is about showing up again and again, even after you stumble. What matters is not that you get everything right, but that you return every time you get it wrong. Perfection sets an impossible standard, and the moment you fall short, you feel like a failure. If someone decides to meditate every day and then misses one morning, they often give up entirely because they think they've broken the streak. If someone sets a goal to eat healthy but has one day where they give in to cravings, they feel like they've ruined everything. That's the trap of perfection. It leaves no room for being human. But consistency is different. Consistency accepts that failure is part of the process, that setbacks will happen, and that missing a step doesn't mean the journey is over. With consistency, one mistake is just that, one mistake, not the end of the effort. Imagine someone learning to play the guitar. If they expect perfection, they will quit the moment their fingers stumble on the strings or a chord sounds wrong. But if they value consistency, they will practice again the next day, even if the notes aren't flawless. Over time, their fingers become faster, the chords smoother, and the mistakes fewer. The improvement happens not because they were perfect from the beginning, but because they kept returning despite the imperfections. The same principle applies to every area of life. The person who shows up with small, consistent effort will always outperform the person who tries to be perfect but quits after a mistake. Consistency builds trust with yourself. Every time you return after falling short, you prove to your brain that you don't quit easily. You show yourself that your commitment is stronger than your setbacks. That trust is far more valuable than a short burst of perfection. It is easy to be perfect for one day, maybe even 1 week. But what matters is whether you can keep showing up for months, years, and a lifetime. That's where discipline grows. Think about exercise. If someone goes to the gym for 5 hours on one day, they will not see transformation. But if they go for 30 minutes every day, even with some days missed, the change becomes undeniable. Consistency compounds. Each session builds on the last, even if some aren't perfect. The same is true with reading, writing, studying, saving money, or any other pursuit. Small, consistent actions stack up while perfectionist bursts fade away. Another powerful thing about consistency is that it lowers the pressure. When you tell yourself you must be perfect, the weight of expectation is so heavy that you hesitate to start. But when you commit to consistency, the pressure disappears. You don't need to be flawless. You just need to show up. Write a little every day, even if the sentences are rough. Practice the skill, even if you make mistakes. Stick to the habit, even if you fall short occasionally. This mindset frees you from the fear of failure, because failure is no longer the end. It is part of the journey. It's also important to recognize that consistency shapes identity. Every time you repeat an action, no matter how small, you reinforce the belief that you are that kind of person. If you read a page every night, you reinforce the identity of being a reader. If you run a few minutes each morning, you reinforce the identity of being someone who takes care of their health. Those identities grow stronger with consistency. And once you identify as that kind of person, discipline feels natural. Perfection doesn't build identity because perfection is fragile. It shatters with one mistake. But consistency builds identity brick by brick, no matter how many times you stumble along the way. Discipline thrives in consistency because life is unpredictable. There will be late nights, unexpected challenges, and days when motivation runs dry. If discipline demanded perfection, it would collapse under the weight of reality. But when discipline is rooted in consistency, it bends without breaking. You can miss a day and still continue the next. You can fail once and still stay on track. Consistency is forgiving, and that forgiveness is what makes it sustainable. Perfection looks strong but is brittle. Consistency looks humble but is unbreakable. The person chasing perfection may shine brightly for a moment, but they often burn out. The person chasing consistency may stumble and fall, but they always rise again. And in the long run, it is the one who rises again and again who wins. Many people look at disciplined individuals and assume they were born that way. They think discipline is a personality trait, like being extroverted or introverted, something that some people naturally have and others don't. This belief is one of the greatest barriers to growth because it convinces people that if they weren't born with discipline, they can never develop it. But discipline is not a trait, it is a skill. And like every skill, it can be learned, practiced, and mastered by anyone who is willing to put in the effort. Think of learning to ride a bicycle. No child is born knowing how to balance on two wheels, pedal, and steer at the same time. At first, it feels unnatural and even impossible. There are falls, scraped knees, and frustration. But with practice, the child's body and mind adjust. Soon enough, riding a bike becomes second nature. The same is true of discipline. It feels awkward in the beginning, uncomfortable, and even frustrating, but through practice, it becomes easier until it eventually becomes part of who you are. When you see someone waking up at 5 a.m., consistently finishing their tasks on time or sticking to a workout routine, what you are witnessing is not an inborn gift. You are witnessing the result of years of training and practice. They built discipline like someone builds a skill, by starting small, by failing often, and by trying again. That is why anyone can build it. If you approach discipline as a skill, you stop asking, why don't I have it? And start asking, how can I practice it today? That shift in mindset is powerful because it removes the belief that you are limited by something you cannot change. The science of the brain supports this idea. Our brains are constantly forming new pathways through repetition. The more you practice a behavior, the stronger the pathway becomes. That is how habits are formed. When you practice discipline in small ways, like choosing to read instead of scrolling or taking a walk instead of watching television, you are literally training your brain to respond differently. Over time, those pathways become stronger, and what once felt difficult becomes automatic. Discipline is not about willpower alone. It is about building these neural pathways through consistent practice until they become your default response. Treating discipline as a skill also changes how you respond to setbacks. If you see it as a trait, every failure feels like proof that you don't have it. Missing one workout, breaking one promise, or procrastinating once becomes evidence that you're just not disciplined. But if you see it as a skill, failure is simply part of the learning process. A musician doesn't quit playing after hitting a wrong note. An athlete doesn't quit training after losing one game. They see mistakes as opportunities to learn and improve. The same must be true with discipline. Each setback is not a reason to give up. It's practice. It's part of the process of learning a new skill. Another important part of seeing discipline as a skill is understanding that it improves with repetition and patience. Just as you wouldn't expect to master a language in 1 week, You cannot expect to master discipline overnight. It takes time, consistent effort, and gradual improvement. But the more you practice, the better you get. One day you will look back and realize that what once felt impossible now feels natural, and you will recognize that you didn't suddenly become a different person. You trained yourself into it. The beauty of discipline being a skill is that it is universally available. No matter your background, personality, or past failures, you can build it. It doesn't matter if you have struggled with procrastination your whole life, if you've broken promises to yourself countless times, or if you've never followed through on a goal. None of those things define your future. Because if discipline is a skill, then it is something you can pick up today, practice tomorrow, and improve every day after that. There is no expiration date on learning. Seeing discipline as a skill also empowers you to teach it. Parents can model it for their children, leaders can model it for their teams, and communities can reinforce it collectively. Skills are transferable, and when others see discipline practiced consistently, they begin to believe they can learn it too. That ripple effect is powerful. It means your own growth doesn't just serve you, but inspires and enables others to grow as well. Ultimately, calling discipline a skill is liberating. It means you are not trapped by what you think you lack. It means discipline is within your control, ready to be shaped and strengthened by your daily actions. And most importantly, it means you are capable of becoming disciplined, not because you were born that way, but because you choose to practice it, refine it, and master it just like any other skill. Discipline is not something mysterious or reserved for a chosen few. It is not a trait you are born with or a talent only some people possess. Discipline is a choice, a skill, and a practice. It begins with the understanding that our brains are not naturally wired for discipline. They are wired for comfort. But with training, repetition, and patience, we can rewire them. It grows through small victories, the quiet daily wins that build momentum and trust within ourselves. It gives us freedom, not the fleeting kind that comes from doing whatever we want in the moment, but the lasting kind that comes from living with control, direction, and purpose. It thrives not in perfection, but in consistency, in showing up again and again, even when we stumble. And above all, discipline is a skill, one that anyone can learn, strengthen, and master with time and practice. The life you want, the goals you dream of, the future you imagine, all of it depends not on luck or talent, but on the discipline you are willing to build. Discipline is the bridge between intention and achievement, between dreams and reality. And the moment you decide to train your brain for discipline, you step onto that bridge. It won't be easy and it won't be instant, but it will be worth it. Because in the end, discipline doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you become.